Okay, thank you so much for joining us tonight for this Ward 5 Bus Network engagement meeting. I wanted to give just a little bit of time to make sure that everyone who wanted to be a part of this meeting had a chance to join. I imagine individuals may join us throughout the evening, and I know my colleague, Conor Shaw, Councilmember Parker's Deputy Chief of Staff, will also be joining us in a little bit. My name is Melissa Littlepage. I am Councilmember Parker's Communications Director, and I'm also a daily Metro bus rider and happy to be a part of Councilmember Parker's Ward 5 Bus Network Task Force that was convened last year, and excited to continue this conversation with WMATA and with neighbors about how we can improve bus network frequency and accessibility in Ward 5 tonight through this meeting. I also just want to give a shout out. I see some of our Ward 5 Bus Network Task Force members on this call. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your work and service last year during phase 2 of this project. And yeah, if you want to say hello in the chat, let us know that you're here, where you are in Ward 5. I'm glad that you're here tonight. Just a little overview of how we plan to spend this time. We're going to spend the first 10 minutes or so. I've already spent 5 of those waiting for people to get into the room. Just on an introduction, how we got here, a little bit of context for Councilmember Parker's work so far in partnering with WMATA. From 6:10 to 6:30, WMATA, we have our wonderful friends here, Al and Charlie, who are going to give a presentation on the proposed 2025 bus network. From 6:30 to 6:40, we'll do some general Q&A on the proposed network, but we're going to save most of our time for specific feedback. We'd love to hear from neighbors on Ward 5 routes, ways that we can improve, things that we like and want to support and celebrate, things that we don't see and we want to ask for. And we'll save the last 15 minutes just for any closing questions and further engagement opportunities that WMATA will share with us. This is and has been an iterative process. WMATA has done a lot of community engagement. They'll continue to do so, so they'll share more about that. So a little bit of background. In April and May of last year, Councilmember Parker convened the Ward 5 Bus Network Task Force to develop and provide feedback to WMATA on their visionary draft network. WMATA conducted months of community engagement on this proposal. They were at metro stations, they had pop-ups and an online form, and we sent formalized feedback through our task force in this letter that you see here on the screen. Using this input that WMATA received from all of their community engagement, they've now introduced the proposed 2025 bus network, which is a new network that can be implemented right away without extra resources, which is what the visionary draft network would be. The proposed 2025 bus network will begin rollout in summer of 2025, which is not that far off. And so we're excited to finally see this redesign coming to life and excited to continue to give feedback. So far, our office has developed the Ward 5 Bus Network scorecard. This takes the feedback that we developed last year in the letter that we sent and compares it to WMATA's proposed 2025 bus network. So how did our recommendations from last year score against WMATA's latest proposal? I don't want to spend tonight going through that whole scorecard because I want to make sure we leave most of our time for hearing your feedback. But if you haven't yet had a chance to explore that, you can do so at ward5.us/bus scorecard. I'm going to drop that in the chat. And we invite you to check that out if you haven't yet. But I'm assuming the people on this call are enthusiastic about the bus and maybe have already seen that scorecard. A couple of the things I want to highlight, though, that we see in this proposed 2025 network that our office is excited about. We're really excited about much improved service and access for Fort Lincoln neighbors, including bringing back bus routes that connect Fort Lincoln to Colmar Manor, the Rhode Island Avenue Brentwood Metro Station, and downtown. This was a big part of our feedback to WMATA last year, and we're really excited to see that for Fort Lincoln neighbors in this latest proposal. We're also excited to see that WMATA is maintaining important service for the Trinidad community comparable to the D8. Last spring's Visionary Network proposal had eliminated this route. We heard from a lot of Trinidad neighbors that they did not want to see that eliminated. We advocated for it in our letter, and we're excited to see it included and maintained. We're also excited to see that they are providing bus service downtown along Rhode Island Avenue in the new D32 route. And that WMATA is improving downtown transfers for faster, smoother bus service across the city for Ward 5 neighbors. Of course, this is not the only feedback. Our Ward 5 bus scorecard is not intended to be our comprehensive feedback. It's intended to be just a comparison of last year's letter to the latest proposal. We want to develop more feedback. That's part of why we're having tonight's meeting. We're also going to reconvene the Ward 5 Bus Network Task Force to again submit formal comments to WMATA on what Ward 5 neighbors want to see. Just a couple things that are top of mind for us at this point in terms of next steps. We want to confirm with WMATA that the new D32 route to downtown along Rhode Island Avenue is continuous and frequent. We want to celebrate and support the proposed D74 service, which would provide a new service along 12th and 10th Streets Northeast, as well as crosstown connection to Petworth and Columbia Heights. We want to engage WMATA on the frequency of the proposed C57 service, which provides a new option for residents of Trinidad and Carver Langston to access Union Market, Noma, and U Street. We want to reiterate significant equity imperative for bus service to be introduced on New York Avenue. That's currently not in the proposed 2025 bus network, but something that we know is important for neighbors along New York Avenue who currently don't have that access. And lastly, we have concern about service reduction proposed on North Capitol Street. These are some of the things that are top of mind for us. Again, not intended to be comprehensive. That's why we're engaging with neighbors tonight. We encourage you to continue to reach out to our office and let us know what you're seeing, what feedback you have as we develop our formal comments for WMATA. That is all I have from our office, and I'm going to stop sharing so that Al from Metro can begin sharing about the proposed 2025 network. Please feel free to use the chat and the Q&A box throughout this meeting. Happy to have conversations while the presentation's going.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I'm Al Himes. I'm the Director of Bus Service Planning and Scheduling here at Metro. I'm also joined by Charley Dingboom, who's our Manager of Service Planning here at Metro. So we'll be going through some of the highlights from the bus network and then get to your questions. So starting off here. Basically, like, now is the time that we want to redesign the bus network. Why are we doing this? Our region is growing. People's travel patterns are changing. That's definitely true as, we continue to see what the new normal is coming out of the pandemic. We need to prioritize the customer experience, and we need to use our limited resources more efficiently. So we're trying to accomplish all of those by this new network. So how did we get to this point? So we started back in the fall of 2022. You may remember that we were out there for some outreach. We talked to people about what they wanted to see in a new bus network. We weren't talking about any maps at that time. It was more just helping develop the vision and goals and guiding principles for how we would design a network. So then we took that information, we went back, and then we came back out in the spring of 2023 with our draft visionary network. So this was the maps that we showed last spring that, was a network that showed, what a bus net, the bus network that the region needs. So if we felt like we fulfilled all of the region's needs with the bus network, things that are reasonable to fulfill with a bus network, this is what it would look like, that draft visionary network. So we spent 9 weeks of outreach on that, heard from, many of you, 20,000 plus interactions, 8,000 plus comments on that. We took all that back. We revised that visionary network. And then we also started this process to say, okay, now that we have this revised visionary network, what elements of this, without additional resources, would we, keep on the map to do a new bus network with the existing resources? So that's the maps that we've gotten to that we're sharing now in outreach is, what would that, network with the same amount of resources that our service today operates look like in a redesigned network. And we have another 9 weeks of public outreach planned on this. It started back on May 13th. We'll run through the 15th of July. And this will also include, public hearings where board members will participate and an opportunity to hear their comments, though any comments that we gather through that entire 9-week period will be part of the public record. So comments that you share here with us tonight are just as valuable as showing up to a public hearing. And where we're headed with this is, we're looking to take a recommendation back to our board this fall. That will include some adjustments to what we're showing you here based on the comments that we hear. And then, once the board gives final approval on a new network, we're looking to try and implement this new bus network next summer, in the summer of 2025. And then beyond that, we'll be continuing to look at ways that we could implement this visionary network, which this cost neutral network is designed to be something that, the visionary network just builds upon. So it doesn't require us changing anything about this proposed network for summer of 2025 to continue to add the visionary pieces. They're all designed as things that we can add on. What are some more of the high level details of what we're getting out of this new proposed network with the same level of resources? We've added more frequent all day, all week service, including midday, evenings, Saturdays, and Sundays. More connections to job centers, transit stations, hospitals, and other places where people want to travel. More convenient and direct service, saving our customers time and improving our operations. More reliable service using bus lanes, so continuing to take more and more advantage of all the bus lanes that the district has been putting in over the years. And also coming out with new route names, making our network more understandable. As far as the visionary network, what additional investments would we see? So when we're able to get additional resources in the future, we're looking to provide at least 30-minute frequency throughout the day on almost all of our routes. The visionary network would add 30 additional routes, in adding more connections between Metro Rail branches and emerging activity centers, creating a region-wide 24-hour bus network that includes overnight connections to our region's airports, and create an even more consistent, frequent service all day and all week. So the proposed 2025 network that we're showing you here tonight, and as part of this outreach, again, we're using the same level of resources that our current service uses. We have updated the service design of those routes, so changing how our routes operate. We've identified, when we came out with the visionary network, we hadn't identified whether Metro would operate some routes or whether it would be provided by other local providers. In this proposal for the 2025 network, all the operator assignments have been identified, so everything that Metro would operate is identified as such in our proposals. We also, as I said, have the new route name proposals shared in this plan, as well as some proposals for bus stop consolidation proposed in this network. So in order to get to the, from the visionary plan that we had last spring to this cost neutral network with the existing resources, there were some trade-off required. Because in the 2025 network, we prioritize consistent levels of service throughout the day and the week, providing better service to equity-focused communities, and making service faster and more direct. That resulted in trade-offs where some areas do have less frequent service during rush hour periods. We have had to reduce some service in areas with lower ridership, and some customers will have to travel further to get to a bus stop. So all those are trade-offs. In order to get the benefits, there has to be some trade-off somewhere in order to stay within that cost-constrained network. So with that, Charley Dingboom, our manager of service planning, is going to talk through some more of the details about how we develop this bus network and the specific routes.
Thank you, Al. So these next couple of slides, we'll go over some of the benefits that Al had outlined on the previous slides, but we'll give a specific example for Ward 5. This is not to say this is the only thing that benefits in those ways, is just sort of to give an example for each of the criteria. So again, the Better Bus Network is looking to better connect the region as a whole. The redeveloped network is connecting 12,000 more jobs within 60 minutes of transit during the morning rush. There's more connections between destinations outside of jurisdiction, so not just from the district, but also over into Maryland and into Virginia. We've got 4 to 6% more bus trips that connect those destinations. And as Al mentioned, for the equity-focused areas, there's a lot more connection into those areas. So the example that we have on the slide here is the better connections up into the Fort Lincoln area. So as I'm sure you're all aware, it's a major destination for your ward. Currently, there's really only one bus that sort of connects there from the Brooklyn station. But in the year 2025 network, there's 3 different routes that'll be serving into the Fort Lincoln area, including one that'll make that connection into Prince George's County. The D32 will connect Fort Lincoln downtown, straight down Rhode Island Avenue, which gives more consistent trips down Rhode Island Avenue. And the C63 extends its existing counterpart route to both the hospital center and to Deanwood, making more connections to those important areas as mentioned. So again, one of the other goals for the Better Bus Network is to make it more convenient. So making more frequent, direct, easier routes allows us to be more reliable for service and reliable for customers making their trips. So this new network looks to save existing customers around 10,000 hours on every weekday and save travel time. There are routes that are more direct, so they cause less confusion and they save people time as they're getting to where they want to go to. There's more frequent service, and frequent service meaning 30 minutes better or for the midday and weekend periods. So we're not just focused on the rush hour periods as we were before. We'll get that sort of all day connection, and that connects to another 140,000 people to frequent service all day. And about 4% of the trips will be more convenient to take by transit. There's a competitive factor of amount of time that it takes you to take transit to a destination versus driving, and about 4% of trips will be more competitive in the new network than they are currently. And the biggest improvements for that come on the weekday PM period and the evening periods as well. So again, the example here shows the existing connection that's going through the hospital center, and on the existing routes, on the H2, H4, there's a very indirect routing through the hospital center. They basically have to go up and into the hospital to connect up into it before coming back out the same way they came in, which is very inefficient. So the new routing in the Better Bus Network kind of takes a through route, passing, coming through one side of the site and then exiting through the other. So there's not as much delay in recirculating the same way that you came to access the hospital site. Again, we took your feedback in this process. I know several of you came out a year ago and were out in a working group session that were focused on the things that were in our last version of the Visionary Network and making comments on that. And so we heard that there was a lot of necessary interest in keeping the same connections from the Trinidad area that were in the existing network. And so there's the same number of one-seat rides going through Trinidad to destinations, including making a new connection up to Fort Totten. And we also know that there was a lot of requirements for or requests for maintaining the existing level of service on those routes. So again, this shows that we're keeping that same service into these important areas that have been identified through your input. And then the other thing that I'll mention that we're having the redesign of the route names. So, we inherited our route system from a lot of different private bus and transit companies from back in the 50s and 60s. So a lot of these are old streetcar line names or old bus route names from private companies before they all got consolidated as part of WMATA. So we have a new approach to route names. So basically there'll be a 3-letter route name. The first letter will be something to tell you the area that you're in. And so you'll either be a D or a C for DC. And in that, we also broke it down into the D will be more for the routes that are oriented towards downtown, the more direct routes. And then the C will be for more crosstown routes or circulator routes connecting in through neighborhood areas. For the areas that are outside of the district, we'll have an M for routes that are in Montgomery County, a P for routes that are in Prince George's, an A for routes that are in Arlington or Alexandria in Virginia, and an F for routes that are in Fairfax, Falls Church, or the city of Fairfax over in Virginia as well. The second number in the route will be a sort of number that sort of identifies the area or the corridor that the route is on. So similar routes that are all along the same corridor or in the same neighborhood will have the same number for that. So it gives you some sort of idea of these routes are all in the same area. And then the third number will be the specific route number to sort of subdivide those ones and distinguish them from one or another. That also can be an X if it's a limited stop or an express route. And we also did this in such a way that we believe that we can have local providers, such as those in Montgomery County or in Prince George's County, adopt this approach if they choose with their routes. So again, the map over the right shows that we've got all the D routes shown there, the D30, 32, 34, and 36, that all travel downtown. So they're all in the red there and all D routes. And then C routes that are the more neighborhood connecting routes are in blue there. So you can see the approach that the route naming takes. The other thing that we're doing is, again, trying to make a faster, more reliable travel time for you as you're on the bus. And so part of that is we have standards, that service guidelines that were for stop separations. So the buses aren't stopping every 20 feet to board and light passengers and taking a very long time to be on their routes. So there's a proposal that there'll be identified about 600 stops that are either too close to the next stop, have low ridership, or do not provide safe pedestrian access, sidewalks and crosswalks, and are otherwise suboptimal to be used for bus service. So there's a number of those that will be used, and we've taken those into consideration with other uses around the areas as much as possible to make sure that those connections are being maintained for folks who need them. So again, we're showing here that there's those stops in yellow that are very close to the other circled stops that are making the bus stop frequently, and by consolidating down to another stop that's basically a block away, that we can keep the bus more reliable and have a solid travel time. And then the last thing we'll touch on is the overnight service. So I know this has been a big connection for a lot of folks who need to be able to get to their places of work or home from their shifts at the end of the night. So the existing network, or the 2025 proposed network, will maintain the same 13 routes or the similar routes to the existing 13 routes that currently have overnight service. The Visionary network does have some additional routes that would be expanded to that overnight service. But again, that is something that requires the additional funding discussion that we've been talking about from the district. With that, I'll pass back to Al, who will key off our discussion for, I think we're going to start with discussion for the more regional network-wide impacts or questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to field some questions that I've seen here in the chat and send them your way, Al. I did see a general question about fare evasion, and curious about how that may impact cuts in the new system. Are there routes with high fare evasion that are going to be cut because of that? Do you have any insight on how that might impact the new system?
Yeah, that's, I mean, we were looking, you know, in designing the network, we were looking at the ridership numbers as counted by the actual number of people that actually are riding the bus. There's devices on the bus that there's an invisible beam when you come in and out of the door that you cross that actually counts passengers in addition, you know, so we were going based on those counts and not the fare box counts.
That's a question I've always had too, so
Yeah.
that's really good to know that WMATA has a way to know how many riders are on with or without fare evasion. That's helpful to know. I'm also seeing a question that is more Ward 5 specific, but I actually don't know the answer to, so I'm going to send it y'all's way. Hopefully you might know. I do remember this, Ms. Tyson. I remember you reaching out to our office about out-of-service buses on Eastern Avenue and Gallatin Street between Michigan Avenue and Sargent Road. There's a no truck sign, but buses sometimes, out-of-service buses sometimes go down that road, which, you know, causes houses to shake. And I remember Ms. Tyson reaching out to our office about that, seeing if buses could not go down that road. In the last couple of days, it appears that the out-of-service buses are no longer being routed through that street. Do you know if that's going to be discontinued or if there's a way to route out-of-service buses to not go on streets where there are no truck signs?
Yeah, so the district legislation on the no truck signs doesn't specifically apply to buses. There's a different sort of roadway restriction that's strictly based on tonnage, you know, so like, you know, if a bridge can only take a certain amount of tonnage and the bus weighs more than that, we obviously can't drive on it, but just the general no truck signs without the weight restrictions, or even the district has some other ones that have a weight restriction that doesn't apply to like a bridge or something. It's like a 1 1/4 ton or something like that. But
I see.
you know, that legislation doesn't apply to the buses.
Right, but that's not exactly what I just want to determine in the last, I want to say the last 3 or 4 days, there have been no buses cutting through here. And if I have to work with councilmen or whomever to get the buses off of our street, then that's what I will do. So it appears that they have been rerouted. The response I got from WMATA basically was that, well, you have to get your buses to wherever it needs to be in time. But the buses have been getting there on time for the last 33 years that I've been here without cutting through our street. It's a very small street. There's only parking on one side. So if someone could confirm with me that they are no longer being routed through our street, I would really appreciate it. As I said, this just started happening in the last, I want to say 2 years.
Yeah, I would need to set up a separate discussion with some people from our operations team that it's those types of questions aren't, you know, Charlie and I don't specifically deal with how the buses get to their starting and end locations on a day-to-day basis.
Right, I see that Ann Chisholm is on this call, and that's who responded.
Yes. Yes, I'm here. I was going to put in the chat if you would send me an email with your email address, and once we talk to the transportation people, we will get back and let you know exactly what the status.
Yeah, because as I had stated in my email, Ms. Chisholm, I know we have talked with you before in regards to the yellow and green line running under my house. So
right,
it is not good. And basically the response that I got was these trips are primarily to place buses and bus operators in service at the beginning of their workday or to take buses and bus operators out of service at the end of their workday. But that doesn't help me in getting them off our street. Whatever I need to do, my email is in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, I will reach out directly to you, Ms. Tyson, to talk about this. Yeah.
I'd appreciate it. I
Okay.
realize that this is a different forum, but
Right.
I talked with Carlos King in McDuffie's office, and he was working with me.
Right.
And I got busy, he got busy. So it's been, on July 20th, it will have been a year.
Okay.
My neighbors are saying now in the last few days, they have not felt buses. So hopefully that's the case. If you could confirm it, I'd really appreciate it.
The staff here tonight does bus planning. I need to reach out to the bus transportation people to find out what's going on. But I promise you, I will get back to you.
Do you know when you'll get back with me, Mr.
Before the end of the week. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Littlepage. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Tyson. I appreciate you. I think I'm going to take this question I see in the chat, which looks like, I'm going to do two more from the chat that are kind of general questions for WMATA on the proposed network. And then it looks like we're getting a few that are more Ward 5 specific. So we'll transition to looking at the Ward 5 network. But the first one that I see in here that's general about the proposed network is, how is WMATA factoring school ridership into its new network? Does the network not yet include special school trips or routes?
Yeah, so as we were designing the network, I know that first of all, Metro does not, any route that Metro operates is open to whoever wants to ride it. There are no, Metro cannot provide any service that's exclusively available to school students. As part of designing the network, we took a look at what those school needs were and where we had some of these routes that were running a very small number of trips per day. And our goal was to incorporate them into the larger network and make those more useful to everyone overall. So, we did take a look at that, and there are, and there will be some of these routes where we've identified like what the frequency is. There still is going to be situations where around very high ridership times that happen to coincide with the time that schools start or let out, where we'll have to add supplemental trips on those routes to make sure there's enough capacity on the route that may not reflect a frequency for a 4-hour period. But that's how we have looked at the school trips, or serving the schools in this network.
Helpful, thank you. And I also see a question here. Is feedback from senior citizens and disabled or limited mobility neighbors included in the recommendations?
Yes, everyone's feedback is included in the recommendations.
Great, thank you. Neighbors who are on the call, please feel free to keep dropping your questions in the chat. I will do my best to keep up. And also I think there's a Q&A button. Yes, there is a way to use the Q&A button if you prefer to let them live there. But I'm going to invite my colleague, Conor Shaw, Councilmember Parker's Deputy Chief of Staff, to start sharing his screen. We're going to dive into the proposed network specific to Ward 5 routes now and go into some of the questions that I see in the chat. The first one being from Uchenna about the proposed P32. Do you see that question, Connor?
Yes, 1 second while I share my screen. Can folks see the proposed network?
Yes, it just popped up for me.
Great. It actually is going to be hard for pulling up the chat now.
Oh, I'm happy to read the question while you
Okay.
navigate this very
Great.
large map. So Uchena's question was, can Metro explain what route proposed P32 would take from Fort Totten towards Maryland? Is it supposed to follow the route of the current E4 Riggs Park? The proposed route map for P32 looks like it is reversing direction of travel along Chilham Place. Can Metro clarify? Yeah, this might be a question for Charlie if you know the
and then
answer.
we probably need to like pull up the, we have a lot of routes we're working with, so pulling it up and taking a look at it, but
Yeah, so it is a sort of it's on this map it's a little bit difficult when you have the overlying lays on it. There's a sort of one-way pair for the P32 there, so that route that's on Chilham is going to be sort of the westbound one, and then the one that's north of that on Nicholson is the sort of eastbound. So coming out of Fort Totten, it would go up Riggs to Nicholson and then over to Eastern, and then go up Sargent Road to connect up to Chilham Road to get over to West Hyattsville. But in the reverse direction, it would go and it would come down on Chilham Place and connect back there. So if you see the two P32s that are right next to each other, they just don't have arrows on this map that show that they're sort of a one-way pair connecting through those areas.
Does that answer your question, Uchenna? So P32 is reversing the current route of travel.
I believe we're traveling the same way on the streets themselves, so we're not planning to reestablish bus stops on the opposite side of the street. I believe we're traveling through there however the bus stops match. We'll go back and double check that for sure, but that's my understanding.
Ethan says P32 will be like the H2/H4, not a loop, if I understand correctly. Do you agree with that, Charlie? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not a loop. It's that sort of one-way connection on either side, but it's definitely not a loop.
Yeah, and what it's comparing, when I look on the route profile here on the Better Bus website, it compares the P32 to the F6, not the E4.
Yeah, so a lot of these are not necessarily like one-to-one replacements.
Right.
So we've been trying to sort of say if there's a segment of the route that gets covered by something in the new network, it still gets flagged. So there will be ones where it'll show up as like it says it's part of the F6 coverage as well as part of the sort of H2 H4 coverage or P6 coverage. I'm sorry, E4.
Okay.
I'm looking at all the comments at the same time too, so I apologize if I'm.
Mr. Montague, you asked in the chat, what about the C75, which is mentioned in our comment write-ups, but not appearing on the map affecting South Dakota Avenue? Connor, I don't know if you can speak to that.
Mr. Montague, are you referring to the service that provided the proposed service in the Visionary Network that proposed a route down the entire length of South Dakota Avenue?
Somebody just posted a comment saying it's not in the Visionary Network, but it was in the comments that said, well, this is what we considered, and it made it, the response in the comments made it seem like it was there, but it's not on this map. So the folks on South Dakota Avenue are still going to be shortchanged. I don't see how the planners, maybe they don't come out here and they're just doing it from their desk, but there are gaps in here, and we're trying to get people onto the bus, and we don't have people who can walk long distances. one of the goals, since Madam Mayor in her wisdom decided to delete the circulator, the fallback position was that WMATA would pick up the slack. And I understand that they're trying to pick up the slack and not spend extra money. But it still leaves a desert, a transportation desert in that part of Northeast Washington. And as we learned that when the budget got tight, we lost all bus service, period. We're not going to have that happen again. So however clever we come up with these routes, we need to make sure that these routes are serving the people who need them, and we can draw people out of their cars onto transit.
So
Thank you for that. If you want to zoom in there, South Dakota, where there is a lack of bus service near Rhode Island Avenue, I agree with you, Mr. Montague, and we don't live far from each other, so we experience that same transportation desert. And I think that is likely to be part of our feedback as well.
Okay.
And so the map that's up now, this is the network with the existing resources. So the June 2025 network. So that's the C75, which would cover that gap on South Dakota Avenue. That is included in the visionary network. We just need additional resources to be able to operate it. This segment of South Dakota Avenue that is showing no service on this map, the summer 2025 map, that segment of South Dakota Avenue also does not have service on the current network either. So
That's true.
That's why that was a choice to put that route on the visionary network, because putting it on this resource neutral map would require taking it from someplace else, and then therefore we'd just be creating a gap someplace else where they have service. So we're trying to, we do understand that that's a need, and that's why we have identified on our visionary network, but we haven't identified it as a need that justifies taking somebody else's service to find the resources to make that, fill that gap.
Well, Melissa.
Well, Mr. Montague, if you don't mind, I do want to make sure we get to some of our other questions. Would you be okay if we maybe return to this if there's time at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate you. Thank you. Connor, did you have anything you wanted to say on that before we move to the next question?
Yeah, Al, I was just curious if you could give us a ballpark cost for how much, let's say, it takes to operate a lower frequency route, a medium frequency route, and a high frequency route. If, these are not numbers we would hold you to, just so that folks have a rough sense of what it takes Metro to operate a line.
Yeah, those are, I mean, there's a lot of complications to how Metro's funded and how those resources are divvied up between the jurisdictions and stuff like that. And that's a discussion we need to have in another forum.
Okay. Understood. All right. Melissa, do you want to move on to another question?
Yeah, so the next one that I see is about speaking to the elimination of the P6. Can anyone speak to the elimination of the P6? The proposed routes don't cover the same areas.
Again, the work for this was to look at things that we could make more efficiencies on and make more direct connections to. So I think the confusion over the P6 may be that it's not missing coverage, but it's maybe not doing it on that same one-seat ride that was previously there. So it had the connection from Anacostia coming across the bridge through the sort of Navy Yard area and waterfront up to the sort of Archives, Gallery Place, Metro Center area. And the replacement routes for it cover similar areas. So the D34 makes the connection from Metro Center up all the way through West Hyattsville through Brookland, making that connection. And the other one, sorry, I'm also pulling up the same ones at the same time. The C11 makes the connection sort of the other way from LaFont Plaza, going down to Anacostia and then continuing south down towards National Harbor. So there's new connections that were found in the data to sort of get to these different areas and make connections for different travel patterns. We also want to leverage existing infrastructure that we have in the form of Metro Rail. So we tried to sort of identify these areas where we could take the routes and maybe change their orientation, connect them to more Metro Rail stations along the way, but make those connections more direct and more frequent. So I think that's a bit of the thought process behind how the P6 was being covered by those other two routes.
And I would just add to that, one of the D34 is sort of the analog to the P6, and one of the proposed changes in the 2025 network is running that service down New York Avenue to the south west of Florida Avenue and New York Avenue. So and that is currently a service that doesn't exist. And so something that I think a lot of folks would see as a benefit of the proposed network.
Yeah, and I would also note that you know, the adjustments that we made to how neighborhoods previously served by the P6 are changed and covered by this D34. That change also is what allowed us to create that D32 route that goes the entire distance of Rhode Island Avenue, rather than the current configuration where a bus runs partway out Rhode Island Avenue, then turns off, then another route takes over it. So it's things like this that allowed us to look at the network a different way.
Helpful. Thank you for this question, Kayla. If you want to come off mute and say more or ask a follow-up to that, I want to invite you to be able to do that, but I'm hoping this answered your question about the elimination of the P6. Okay. The next question that I am seeing is from Erica Chapman. I'm not understanding the Fort Lincoln to connect to Rhode Island B8/B9 bus. Is that a proposed bus route, at least during rush hour?
I don't believe that there's a strict B8, B9 analog for what was being proposed in that as part of that sort of network of things that were going into the Fort Lincoln area. So we had the D32, which is probably the most frequent one and sort of more direct cut over to Rhode Island. But again, that's part of what Al was mentioning, that we sort of get to stay on Rhode Island on that route pretty much all the way down into the downtown core. There's also the C63, that's a crosstown route, so that takes you over and connects through Rhode Island and up into the Brookland area. So that makes the connection up into the area north of Rhode Island without going on Rhode Island itself. And I think we also had one other one. We had one that was coming up on Eastern Avenue, so that's not exactly the same connection for Rhode Island Avenue, but it did go up to that transit center just on the just north of Eastern Avenue up in Maryland. So I think those were sort of the three major connections that were being made to the Fort Lincoln area in the proposed network.
And I
Thank
think
you, Charlie.
yeah, while we're on these routes too, I saw a couple other questions pop up associated with the D32. So while we're on it, there was a question about whether it pulls into Rhode Island Avenue Station, and currently as proposed, it does not. We were trying to make a quicker trip because of the time it takes to pull in and out of the station. So that's currently how it's proposed. And the terminal point downtown is right around the vicinity of the MLK library.
That's helpful. That was one of our questions when we first were looking at the proposed network, and I see the arguments for both pulling into the station and not. I think that to bring back something most similar to the G8 or G9, like what was had along Rhode Island in years past, not stopping through the metro definitely makes the most sense and helps keep that service continuous and frequent. So thank you for making that clarification, Al. Let's see. I'm going to keep moving through questions here. This is a more general question, probably for Al and Charlie. We have a question that says, all routes included, how does the plan include disinfecting and sanitizing buses? What is the frequency?
That's a question we'll just have to refer to others in the organization. That wasn't part of our task as part of this project. So
okay. Not part of planning bus routes.
Yeah.
We can get back with you, Torrance. Please feel free to send us an email. I'm going to drop our office's email address here in the chat. And this is for everyone. If you have any follow-up you would like us to do, any questions that didn't get answered tonight, we can make sure we find the right person in WMATA and get you an answer. Let's see, gonna keep moving along here. And then we had a question about what is the downtown destination point for the proposed D32 route as it travels south along 11th Street. Ethan answered and says it stays on 11th to the Chinatown area. Do we have a specific terminus for that bus?
Yeah, I believe it's right there at the MLK library.
Okay. Sure thing, Scott. Thank you for the question. We also just had a comment here. I would echo it. I'm hopeful the level of service frequency of the 80, I'm not sure what the current equivalent is in this proposed, but I'm hopeful the level of service frequency improves with the elimination of the P6.
So that's the D30 route. So that's also one that, again, I think this is sort of the balance of the service that we can do with the existing resources. And so again, I think we kind of identified in one of the previous discussions that there's a lot of sort of network effects. You make one change here, which allows you to make another change elsewhere, which allows you to make another change somewhere else. So it's not to say we can one-for-one all these changes, or that just because we have a reduction somewhere automatically means we have these funds to go elsewhere, because we're making new connections, as Connor mentioned, such as that D34 connection. So it is something that I think we're at an approximate frequency similar to the existing route. We will obviously have a period after the new network is put in place. If that's put in place in June of 25, we'll have a period where we'll then be evaluating the performance of all these. We will see, where we found areas that we may have a little bit of extra time because the trip does not take as long as we were anticipating. Likewise, there may be things in the other way. So we will have to make adjustments as time goes on. It'll obviously be something that we'll be monitoring as part of our normal service change process after implementation.
Thanks, Charlie. Really helpful. I don't see any more questions in the chat, although you're welcome to keep entering questions. And I think now we're going to transition to wrapping up. I just want to emphasize that we want to continue to hear your feedback in Councilmember Parker's office as we, begin to prepare our formal comments to give to WMATA. We want to know if there are things that are priorities for you and you would like for us to elevate those. Please share them with us. We have a record of the chat here, so we'll be using that to include as we keep looking through the network. But I'm going to send it back over to Al and Charlie to share a few more ways you can continue to share your feedback directly with WMATA and engage as this process goes on.
Yep. So, just to cover the next steps in the project. So, you know, there's still multiple opportunities for people to provide feedback. So if you think of something after this meeting that you want to add to it, there's still plenty of time to come talk to us and fill out surveys. Also, if you know people who weren't able to make this tonight, but really feel should get their comments in, please encourage your friends and neighbors and everyone to add their comments, show up to some of the other events. We do have a District of Columbia Discovery Day scheduled on Thursday, June 20th from 3 to 7 p.m. and that's at the Columbia Heights Educational Campus. That will include an expo on this and plus a number of us from the service planning team to talk to about more about the route network. And then we'll also have a separate room at that event from 5 o'clock for that official public hearing meeting, you know, with one of our board members there to hear comments on the new network and your thoughts on it. We'll also be out there, have people riding buses, especially ones that might have high change, to help people fill out surveys and take their input on the route. Plus, we'll also have pop-up events where we'll go to some higher ridership areas and set up a small tent and look for people to get comments and talk to them about the network. And one of those is planned to be at the Rhode Island Avenue station on Monday, June 17th from 3 to 7 p.m. There's also a lot of opportunities online to look at the network. We have all the system maps for each state level jurisdiction. We have a route profile on every single route that we're proposing, which shows an individual map of that route and the details on the frequency it would operate. We have neighborhood profiles, which you have the region broken down into many different, you know, sub areas throughout the region, and provides a summary of how the service would change in those areas, and also, you know, information about learning about all those new route names. Additionally, online, we have an interactive map where everybody can pin comments right on the map, and you can actually see what others are posting on it, so you can get a sense of what others in your neighborhood are posting and agree with their comments or add different comments that people hadn't thought of already. You can take a survey, you can provide us written comments, or you can upload a document, all ways to provide your feedback on you know, what your thoughts are on this new network proposal. And so the next stop is we're gonna so after that, this round of outreach closes on July 15th. We're going to take all that feedback back. We're going to make some additional revisions to this network, and we're going to bring that network to approval in late fall to our board. And then we'll be looking at that point, once we get board adoption on the network, to prepare for implementing this new network in the summer of 2025. So with that, thanks everybody for joining us, and we appreciate all the feedback you gave us tonight.
Thank you so much, That's really helpful information. Appreciate you fielding questions. Mr. Montague, I promised you we would return to your concerns if you want to come back to that now for a little bit of continued conversation.
Thank you. Actually, I was sitting here thinking about it. I still haven't worked there. I kind of have an issue with the planners, but let's not even get into that. The numbers, they were talking about low ridership routes. Okay. They said that there's this beam that counts people getting on and off. One of the questions I had, if the bus is off, or if the fare box system is not working, does that counter still work?
Yeah, so the equipment on the buses still remain on for 10 minutes after the bus is actually shut off, so it runs off the battery power for 10 minutes. After that, the entire system would be shut down.
So okay, so here, the reason I asked this question, and this is very specific to Rhode Island Avenue, okay? As it stands now, the current system prioritizes the T18 and the T14 over the 83 and the 86. They always arrive just prior, they're limited stop buses, and they always arrive just prior to the local buses, okay? Operators on the locals, the 83 and the 86, will bypass a stopped T14 and T18, therefore denying people who want to get to a local stop to have to take a jump stop, a limited stop, to get to wherever they're going because they're tired of waiting for the bus. Now, you said that the counters work for 10 minutes essentially until the bus really goes to sleep. All right. But it's been my experience, particularly at this area, when drivers take a pit stop and before they're scheduled to leave, as many as 25 people could board the bus and not be counted. And so you're not going to get a true count of who's getting on the bus and who's getting off. And also on the rear of the buses, now that we have the double tap system, most of the rear readers are covered over, not in service. So I'm not saying that your numbers are wholly bogus, but I'm saying your numbers are suspect given observed behaviors along certain routes. And I am fairly sure, and these are not people who are not doing intentional fare evasion. The operator's not there, the fare box is not working. They take a seat because they want to get home. But they're not counted as riders. Whereas on other routes, the 83 and the 86, they're low ridership because the 18 and the 14 picked up everybody. Okay, so your first thought would be, oh, we don't need the 83, we don't need the 86, and da 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 da. So this D, let me see, what's this map on here? The
D32.
The D something other is going to make everybody happy. The D32 is going to make everybody happy because it's going to come up and it's going to, I assume, be a local service and pick up everybody. I'm not willy-nilly ranting. I'm saying these are things that I have personally observed since before the pandemic, but more importantly, after the pandemic.
Yeah, so we, first of all, we still do have a P10, which is essentially a replacement of the 86, except it doesn't go all the way out to Calverton. It goes from Rhode Island Avenue to College Park, and then we've done some stuff up in Prince George's County to serve Calverton a different way. But so we do have that route that leaves Rhode Island Avenue Station and makes all the local stops up through Hyattsville, going through Hyattsville Crossing, and then up to College Park.
Okay, go ahead.
And then, so that service does exist. As far as the accuracy of the counters, we do have a process that we have to go through to audit those passenger counters. So we actually have to send people out and physically count and match it up against the counters, and they're, and we have to verify that those counters are actually within a certain percentage of accuracy. So we do that required work to audit those counters and make sure that they're reliable.
And there are also counters at the back door as well, and they're separate from the fare box system. So the fare box system's not working, they're still functioning.
Okay, so this is as you said, it costs zero implementation or proposal.
Yes.
So whatever equipment we have on place, whatever operators we have, whatever mechanics we have, whatever street supervisors we have, this is it.
Yes, it's the same resources that we operate with our current service. Yes.
Okay. Now, you plan these routes out. Did you take into account reallocation of vehicle types to accommodate the new routes? See, our garage is being rebuilt, and a large part of, we're losing a lot of 40-foot buses in favor of TICs. But the TICs will not serve our neighborhoods. They're going to serve elsewhere. I'm just asking, is that since you said this is vehicle resource available, are we going to get more buses, less buses, better buses? Or we're just going to squeeze the rock until it screams?
No, we will continue to serve routes with the type of bus that's appropriate for that route.
Okay.
And, Mr. Montague, I do want to, point out that even in this cost neutral proposal, while we're seeing, changes in some places, some of those changes include increased service to areas that don't currently have it. I am particularly impressed that Fort Lincoln is getting the attention it's needed and deserves in a cost neutral proposal. So, there are going to be trade-offs, and I'm always grateful for your insight and input, Mr. Montague, because you help me see things I miss. And some of the things that you're pointing out tonight, I imagine are going to make it into our formal comments. So I just, want to say thank you for what you're pointing out. Mr. Roberts, I noticed that you came on video for the first time, and I'm wondering if that means you'd like to share something.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was on mute. No, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone. And I apologize since you went all this effort to get all the input from Ward 5. And of course, I was late to the game, so I apologize.
You're fine.
And I guess, my neighbors, some of my neighbors don't like the fact that there's going to be buses going down First Street in Bloomingdale. And I understand why, because even the Office of Planning in some previous study said that North Bloomingdale was considered underserved in public transportation. Now I walk everywhere, so I'll walk to the Kennedy Center and I'll walk to Friendship Heights. So I don't care. I walk everywhere. But I'm the exception. So I guess in Bloomingdale we have the G2, which goes down New Jersey Avenue and ends up at 14th and P, DuPont Circle, and then Georgetown, and then we have the G8, which goes down, which ends up at Farragut Square downtown. And I got yelled at today on Twitter because I said Gallery Place wasn't downtown. Like, oh my God, so I got shot. Anyway, so I understand that the D32 goes down 11th Street, as you said, Mr. Himes, or Mr. Dingboom. It'll end up at the MLK Library, which is okay. And then, but now if I want to go down to like 14th P, I have to take the bus, the C55, which goes across U Street, get off at 14th Street or 16th Street, and catch one of the north-south buses. I guess that's the deal. So I end up having to go to two buses rather than one. And I mean, it is what it is, right? Currently, I need to take one bus to go where I want to go, and then I'll have to go to two buses. I'll live, but whatever. That was it.
That's really helpful. And I would love if you could send that to us like in an email or in a written comment, or even just drop it in the chat here because we'll have record of the chat. But I want to make sure we capture that feedback specifically. Because, going from one bus to two is not ideal, but it is, maybe part of the trade-offs we're making. So just want to make sure we capture that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And just a comment for anyone else who might be feeling like, oh, I was also late. It's totally fine. We're going to be collecting your feedback for a little bit before we, prepare our formal comments. As Al and Charlie mentioned, they're going to be collecting feedback until July 15th. Is what I think I heard you say.
Yeah, July 15th.
Yep. So we've got time. Erica, I see your hand raised. Feel free to come on off mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize. I wasn't sure or I wasn't able to hear if you spoke about the B8 or B9. I do have a comment about the Fort Lincoln route. We have to ride 30 minutes to go to Brooklyn when Rhode Island Avenue, which was the B8 or B9, took us directly to Rhode Island Avenue in 15 minutes. My child has to go to Brooklyn, then catch the train to get back to Rhode Island Avenue to catch the school to McKinley Tech. I think that is so unfortunate for children, and you're saying access to people in underserved communities. Some parents have to work. Some kids may be latchkey kids. That doesn't mean that we don't care about how our kids commute to school. Not to mention, my son was in an accident down on Bladensburg Road because they have to run for the bus. You know, it's just bad. You're saying, hey, I want to take bus routes from here, and you might have to walk further, but no one is thinking of the children who parents have to go to work before high school or middle schoolers are getting to school.
It's likely that the D32 would provide a direct trip from Fort Lincoln to McKinley. It'd be a 3-block walk from Rhode Island Avenue to McKinley, but that service would provide.
Your concerns are addressed in this proposed network, Ms. Chapman. Fort Lincoln gets much better bus service than it has now, and as Al just mentioned, that D32 route could either take your student straight to the Rhode Island Avenue Metro Station and on from there, or even, just continuing on Rhode Island and then walking a few blocks to McKinley. So I think this will be an improvement from what you have now.
And one other thing I'll just add in terms of the school connections. So the previous sort of thing where we had these individual trips that were added around the dismissal time and in the very limited areas, that sort of focused the amount of time that people would be able to make those connections, or students would be able to make those connections to a very narrow window. By making these school routes on regular routes and on a normal routing, we get to have the benefit of a more frequent all-day service. So if kids are there late for after-school activities, whether that's sports, tutoring, anything else like that, or if they have to arrive early for other reasons, it gives a longer window of time that they have frequent service to be able to make those bus connections. So they're not running to catch the one bus that was making their connection previously. So that may not be in absolutely every circumstance, but that is a benefit that I think is not necessarily abundantly clear just from this approach, that we're making a all-day connection to schools by including them on the normal routing.
Thank you, Charlie. Really helpful. We're a little bit past the time I had originally thought we would go to. And so to, respect everyone's time, I'm going to wrap up the meeting here. But I want to say thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you for your comments. Please, I'm going to put our office's contact information in the chat one more time. We want to make sure that we hear from you. Please continue to reach out to us. And of course, WMATA is taking feedback directly from residents on their website as well. So continue to give feedback. We want to make sure that your voice, your feedback, your perspectives are elevated through this process. And again, thank you for joining us tonight.